Hi everyone, this is Kieran versus Daniel L.E. Played on the 23rd of February. Let's get into it. No, okay, straight off, I'm gonna have to comment on this opening. Knight C3. There's a huge difference between E4. Whoa, not E3. Between E4 openings and and D4 openings. In E4, this sort of four-knight stuff is great, absolutely, because you don't ever want to push this pawn, to release your king. But in D4 openings, it changes dramatically. When you play D4, the knight doesn't want to sit on C3. This is not a good opening. If you this is a mirror imaged E4 pawn opening, but there's no actual point to it. There's no pressure on this pawn because the queen is defending it, and all you've done by putting this knight here is you've taken away your best strategy for attacking the center, which is to advance this pawn here and put pressure on d5 with this pawn. There's no problem moving this pawn. Moving this pawn is great. It's backed up by this bishop, and it releases the queen to go to b3 and harass the b7 pawn and the d5 pawn. So chucking your knight on c3 on move 2, I mean, I'm sure it's an opening. I'm sure someone somewhere has played it before, but it's not a particularly it's not an opening I think is particularly good. I think black easily gets equality in a position like this. And in fact, I would prefer black's position because black hasn't made the mistake of sitting in the way of his c pawn. So bishop f4, I mean, you see people try and do these sort of tactical tricks like knight b5 and trying to steal this pawn. You see there's a lot in junior chess, and one of the biggest problems is a lot of juniors in tournaments actually fall for it, so it works. So a lot of players stick with these really bad openings because they win games with them. And the problem is when you're playing 1 hour chess and you're playing against some of the top juniors in WA, then they're not ever going to fall for this trick. And all you've done is put your knight on a really uncomfortable square. Once black plays like c6, for instance, like if black played c6 right now, this knight is just garbage. It's not going there. It's hitting at a pawn. It's not ever going here. In order to make this knight good on this square, you actually need the pawn in front of it. So the knight and pawn are both pressuring the center together. Black did not play c6, so I really think black should have right here, just gone c6. And now black's position is wonderful. I actually like this position for black. His queen can jump out to here and put pressure along here and down here if it wants to. But he's got his pawn structure pointing straight, towards the king side like this. The plan of an eventual e5 is very, very strong. Now he doesn't even have to do that. He can play g6 and put his bishop on g7 if he wants. He's got lots of different options of how he wants to play this. Okay, he played a6, so obviously he was so Daniel was aware of the tactic. He knew exactly what white was trying to do and put a stop to it immediately with a6. But I really think c6 would have been a better way to stop it. Okay, so a6, knight f3, bishop f5. Yeah, I mean, it's perfectly fine for him to bring his bishop out here. There's no danger of queen b3 causing discomfort, so this is just fine. I'm happy with black's position. g3. Now, putting your bishop out here and playing g3 in the same opening is usually a very risky thing to do, because the pawn on g3 interferes with the bishop's escape square. So this bishop, you'll find, is quite uncomfortably placed here, and is vulnerable to a g5 thrust, usually at the most unexpected time. And the bishop can get in trouble. And you can't just go like e3 like this, because you end up trapping your bishop out the front of your pawn chain. And then it introduces all sorts of tactics. This knight just has to move away somewhere, and then he has to go in f6, immediately threatens g5, winning the bishop. And that time he gets might allow him to go e5 and get a big center. So g3 and bishop f4. If you're going to be playing g3 sort of moves, you don't want the bishop here. You either want it here and then chopping the knight off the moment it gets attacked, or you actually want to leave it, back here somewhere. Yeah. So e6, yeah, I like black's play here. Bishop g2. I mean, fianchetting this bishop is also, it's not something I'd like to do when your opponent has just got a rock solid pawn on d5. Maybe his plan is to play something like knight d2 and try and get an e4 push in. Even then, this knight does not want to be here. It wants to be here, and he wants the pawn sitting there supporting this pawn so that he can safely get that push in. Okay, bishop b4. Yeah, that seems good to me. Castles h6. Not sure if that's necessary. I think you might. There's no need to play it. I think just simply castling is great here. Don't play these. I don't think you should play these moves, these h6 moves, unless they're, unless it's immediately necessary. For example, if a knight or a bishop jumping onto this square would cause you a lot of discomfort, then you play h6 to keep it out. Or if your king is on the brink of getting back row mated, you h6 to create an escape square. But playing it this early on is, I would say it's a mistake. I think there's far better uses for that move, like just simply castling, or bringing this knight to here, for instance, and then you can start to prepare c5 and going on an attack on the queen side that way. So now this knight jumped into e5. Okay, so it looks like it's getting out of the way of the bishop. Maybe he's planning some sort of f3, e4 advance. If he is, well done. If he's not, then I'm not sure this knight wanted to go here. I think, dealing with this pin, dealing with this situation first might be the way to go. It's hard to see how, though. I don't really want to pin myself. Maybe bishop back to d2 and admit the bishop's not very well placed out here. Yeah, it's hard to tell. Knight a4 is an option as well, aiming for the c5 square, but putting your knight on the side of the board like this is not good. But the knight's on a silly square anyway on c3. It's tricky, and you don't really want you don't want to play things like e3 because then you're at serious risk of getting this bishop trapped. So the problems white has is due to the fact this knight is sitting on c3. Maybe knight a4 is needed, something like this, and then you can think of moves like c3 to get rid of the bishop, and you got to then make sure this knight doesn't get trapped by b5. It probably is aiming for c5, or you can go c3 and then b3 or b4 and bring the knight back to here. I don't know, it's hard. It's difficult to work out how white should deal with this problem. If his knight wasn't here, he could be looking to go bang c4 and immediately put pressure on the center straight away. He played knight e5, so I'm hoping that he's going f3, e4. Black played g5, and we can sort of see the discomfort of that bishop right away. So the bishop dropped back to d2. Okay, that deals with the pin problem. Still has to find a better spot for this knight. Whoops. Yeah, the biggest problem black has is by charging these pawns up the board, castling is really scary now. But you can't leave your king in the center either. So what to do with his king is tricky. Yeah, it's hard to find a good move for black here, to be honest. Maybe just developing. Just knight bd7 is the way to go. I'm getting a bit worried. There are some tactics here. Things like knight here could be a problem. In fact, it could be a massive problem. After the bishop takes, you lose this knight here. No, you don't. The queen's defending it. And there's also this bishop line along here that has to be dealt with. So the tactics are starting to creep in. Maybe black should just put an end to these tactics straight away. Just retreat the bishop back to d6 or something. And just eliminate those tactics altogether. Well, he played rook g8. So it looks like he's trying to defend his g-pawn so that he can start marching this pawn up and hacking down the h-file like this. The problem is if you're hacking down the h-file, you really want to leave your rook on the h-file and find a different way to keep this pawn defended. You can't do things like knight here. That just loses a piece. He just takes the knight, defending his bishop at the same time with a discovered attack on this knight. Yeah, the bishop needs to move. Maybe bishop e7, so you've got extra defense for this g5 pawn through the knight, and then the knight can move, and then that will allow you to h-pawn hack and leave your rook on the g-file. So something like that. Okay, rook g8 was played, and now there is a tactic in the position, and well done. Well done to white. Well done, Kieran. This is great that you spotted this. This is amazing. Bang. Good stuff. If he takes the bishop, you grab the knight with check, and then you get your bishop back, and you've just won a pawn. If he takes the knight with the pawn, you just grab the bishop. And if he takes with the knight, this is what makes this combination really hard. After taking with the knight, you go pawn fork. And you're going to end up with equal material, but you've just won the center. The center's yours. The position's opened up. This bishop is starting to look crazy good along this diagonal, particularly with black undeveloped. It's actually quite extraordinary what's going on here. This is really good tactical play by Kieran. So after e4, this is what happened. The bishop took. Does he have anything better? Probably not. I mean, the point is you don't want to be swapping pieces if you're about to lose material. Are you going to lose material? It's going to be equal material. You're going to lose the center. So maybe you do want to swap pieces. Maybe this is actually the right idea. According to the engine, the best move here is just bishop takes e4, which I'd probably have to agree with, actually. You just trade that off, and after he takes back, then you grab this, and queen goes here. And this knight it's about to get chased away by c4, and your opponent's about to get the center. But because the pieces have been swapped off, white owning the center is not as big a deal. Big centers are great to own with lots of pieces on the board because that gives you a lot of space, and your pieces can maneuver around more easily than your opponent's pieces, which get in the way of each other and get cramped. So it's good that Daniel is trading pieces, knowing that he's about to lose the center. So e4 he took, the queen took back, and now this bishop should probably just take this pawn. Instead he decided on f6. That he's throwing complications in. I don't think they're necessary, to be honest. All this seems to be doing is weakening his pawn structure and making his king more and more exposed. I think just the very simple bishop takes e4 would be the way to go, and after bishop takes, something like c6 to blunt this bishop line. Sure, your opponent's going to go c4 and bang and get the center, but after maybe knight e7, knight f6 is probably better, actually. After knight f6, black can kind of defend this. It's equal material. White has a huge center, but there's not that many pieces on the board. I mean, the engine is saying that white's winning by 2 pawns. 2 points worth of material, and white is definitely better. White's making the plays here, and white's the one who's going to be trying to bang through a d5 at the right time. But black might be able to defend this. The biggest issue for black is where does his king go? It's not going kingside. It's not staying in the center. It has to go queenside, but there are holes everywhere. There's no dark squared bishop though to take advantage of those holes, so it might be okay on the queen side. Okay, so queen d2, f6, so hitting the random button is probably unnecessary here. I would have preferred to just go into that defensive position. I mean, it was great tactical play by white that got into such a great position in the first place. So f6, the knight jumped back to d3. Yeah, I like that. The pawn fork is still there. The bishop went to g4. Ooh, I can't say I agree with that. Definitely... the engine has come up with a reasonable idea, knight f4. And the idea is if he takes, you can then retreat your bishop away, and you've got this idea of taking this pawn and opening the g file on his king for your rook to get up to monkey business. So yeah, that's an interesting idea. Bishop takes is also reasonable. It's a lot worse now than it was a second ago because your e-pawn is now very, very weak. With this pawn on f6 instead of f7, you can just imagine a million rooks and queens coming down this line and harassing this pawn and eventually winning it. So something like knight f4 is where I'd be looking to play here. One of the big dangers is, you might think this taking here, but I think after takes here, for instance, and the king takes back, I think black is okay here. I think black is actually fine. According to this, according to the engine, white shouldn't take back. White should just play knight c5. And yeah, I like that idea. The knight's trapped. It's actually got nowhere to go. And the threat of just taking this is a bit of a pain. And if this takes here, suddenly you open yourself up to checks on this file here. The king takes the knight, and then there's rook checks galore. Interesting. So knight f4, that's interesting. He decided bishop g4, and And yeah, after takes, it's looking pretty good for white. Black's king is in deep trouble. So you know, just a simple rook check on this line. I'm just trying to work out which rook wants to go there, because f4 is a good plan. You know, trying to get f4 in, but definitely developing a rook with check makes sense. So maybe rook a e1 is better than rook fe1. And the idea is you throw the check in, the king is going to have to move. Now the king can't castle. Then you go something like f4, and you open up the other rook, and you have these two rook lines just murdering poor black here. If he takes, you can take back with the knight or the rook. They both look really good, and this pawn becomes backwards. If he doesn't take, you're going to take him, opening up this rook. Yeah, this rook line, and it's just so strong. And this pawn is on pre the whole time as well. So in fact, yeah, you wouldn't even play f4. You would just grab this pawn first and maybe play f4 a couple of moves later. The move played was rook fe1, which isn't as strong, I don't think, because like one of the things about this check is you don't want the king, you know, you want the king heading this way. You know, the moment the king tries to head this way, then you go f4, and suddenly you're opening up this line straight at the king. So yeah, the king doesn't, and if the king goes the other way, yeah, you grab this pawn here on the rook. It's just really bad for black. So after rook fe1, the king didn't go to f7. It went to f8. That's not as good as f7. You can understand the logic behind going to f8 because white doesn't have a dark squared bishop, but white has a light squared bishop. So you kind of want to keep your king off of light squares. The problem is you're interfering on f8. You're interfering with your rook, and your rook can't get over to the e file to challenge white's rooks on the e file, and it desperately needs to. You know, black needs to accept the fact that he's going to be a bit vulnerable for a while. He can always blunten this bishop by playing c6. And he has to very quickly, you know, get his knight out, get his queen out of the way, and then get his rooks on that file and not let white dominate that file. Okay, so king f8 was played, and then h3 was thrown in, hitting the bishop. Well, the bishop didn't really want to be on g4, so this might actually be helping black a little bit. Just trying to work out where to go. Maybe h5, and then you can drop back to f7 to defend the pawn. According to the engine, though, that's really bad because knight c5 threatens this pawn and threatens a knight fork at the same time. Ouch. In that case, yeah, bishop c8, undeveloping completely, might be the only move. The bishop stays guarding e6, and it also guards the b7 pawn. So if the knight jumps into here, there's no actual threat. If it jumps into there, the bishop rips it off, and the bishop stops the knight taking here as well. So after h3, bishop c8 is the move to play. Why couldn't he play? Oh yeah, the bishop's guarding e6, but I was just about to ask why couldn't he play knight c5 straight away. Okay, so h3 was played. Bishop went back to f5. And okay, maybe trading for this knight. I'm not sure. I don't think you really want to trade this bishop off. I think you kind of need this bishop to guard all these light squares around the king. Bishop might need to sit on g6 or something just to keep the king a bit safer. g4 was played. I think you're just chasing the bishop to a better square. Actually, the bishop doesn't want to sit in g6. It probably wants to sit in c8. But in this case, the bishop should just trade for the knight. Much better is, you know, knight c5 straight away, hitting this square here. This is just a big pain in the neck for poor black to deal with. I don't think he can do something like b6. I mean, this just gets white perfectly in position for the double, and black is in deep trouble. Yeah. So g4 I think was a mistake. I think knight c5, according to the engine, queen b4 check is even better. And after king g7, just stealing this pawn here with the queen fork. I don't know about stealing pawns like that. Maybe that is good. Yeah. Steal this pawn, hit the rook, and hit this twice with both the queen and the bishop. That's just very strong. Simple queen fork in the position. I can't believe I missed that. Okay, so he played g4. The bishop dropped back to d7. That just interferes with the defense of the pawn by the queen, giving him a free pawn, which he saw and took. No, here I think you have to go back to, well, you have to take the knight, I think. You're just going to get rid of that. Knight's too scary. Once the knight gets to c5, it's really, you're in a lot of trouble. the e6 square and the b7 square. So just rip that knight off. Didn't take it, played bishop back to d7. Now the bishop's sitting on the spot that the knight wants to be, but more importantly, it's interfering with the queen, and white just took a free pawn. The rook then went to g7. According to the engine, black shouldn't even bother trying to save that rook. That's interesting. Because after here, this queen b4 check is devastating. Yeah, how do you deal with that? You got to put your rook in the way, don't you? And then what? After rook takes, queen takes, the queen grabs this pawn here, and that rook is trapped, and you just lost it. So what actually happened was that queen b4 check wasn't played. Bishop takes b7 was played, hitting the rook, forcing the rook to a7, and then he played queen b4. So nice idea, just wrong move order. So Kieran's found all the right moves. He just needed a different move order. He needed to play the queen b4 check first and grab it with the queen instead of grabbing with the bishop. After queen b4 check, the king ran to g8, and then he went bishop d5 check. Yeah, hitting the king again. So the king goes to h8, which is good. He stayed off of the white squares. That's good stuff, Daniel. And then the queen just dropped into c5, and that rook is actually toast. So Kieran didn't find the best tactics, but he found some really, really nice tactics. Okay, black played c6. At least that way he's hitting the bishop. The queen took on a7. Takes here. This is yeah, really bad for black now. Black's the exchange down. The exchange and 2 pawns down. Yuck. So queen c5 was played. Yeah, just getting the queen off, out of danger, off this line of the of the rook and the bishop. Fair enough. a5. Well, I mean, there's not many good moves here. I think you got to get this knight out of the corner. Get this knight active. Knight c6 is the way to play this. a5. I'm not sure what that does. I mean, it doesn't do anything. When you're losing like this, you have to get your pieces, whatever remaining pieces you have to get them as active as possible, which means you need to find extremely good squares for them and maneuver them to those squares, you know. So like for the knight, for instance, you start looking at squares on the board. Where do you want this knight to sit? And, you know, something like c4 or e4 would be a great spot for the knight. f4 would be spectacular if you could find a way to get there. Yeah, f3 as well. Yeah, first get it out and then start looking to find a way to, I mean, because this is the only spot that you can go, find a way to get to one of these great squares on the board. F4 is the place, like, you know, move the queen, then go knight here to there or something like that. But that's what black should be doing here, not moves like a5. He should be taking his worst piece and finding a much better place to put it. Rook e2, so white just prepares to double. That's a really good play. Okay, so we can see the reason for a5. He wanted to get his knight to a6. I'm not sure why it's sitting on a6 so. Where is it going from there? It doesn't want to go here. White can just swap it off. It can't go there. The pawn's guarding it. And if it goes here, yeah, maybe it's heading to here and here. So how many moves is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves to get it there. Whereas you could probably 1, 2, 3, 4 moves. Oh, but move the queen. It takes 5 moves either way. So now that I've seen the reason behind a5, it doesn't seem as bad anymore. I still think it should have just come straight out to the middle where it harasses this pawn and yeah, it can really quickly charge over here. One of the big things is actually guarding the entry square on e7 from this rook. Okay, so a5, rook e2, knight a6, queen d6. That's really good. That's just a thorn in black's side. How does he deal with this? So he played rook h7. I'm not sure what that does. It looks like maybe black's trying to just go h5 takes and get some play down the h file. Fair enough. I mean, he's in desperation mode right now. If he can get h5 in, maybe he can get back into this game. So rook here was played, and then the knight moved to c7. Could that knight have been taken last move? So queen there, rook here. Why can't the queen just say thank you for the free knight? It probably could have. Or maybe that was black's plan. He just basically says, go ahead, take my knight. I'm going to use the time you waste taking my knight to get this advance in, and then maybe, you know, maybe take the pawn with the idea of the queen swinging across and trying to get a mate down here or something. Fair enough. I mean, you're going to lose anyway, so try for one last ditch attempt. So the knight went to c7. So I mean, why give up on this idea? Just let him have the knight and just charge this pawn forward. Oh, you can't because of this. I see. Because the bishop is pinned to the queen, and that's just a rook fork. So there's a tactic there. So knight c7 actually is a good move. It stops the rook fork. Yeah, okay. So in other words, yeah. So yeah, knight c7, great. Rook e7, yeah, infiltrating to the 7th rank. This is pretty much all over. There's not much that can be done here. The threat is just taking the rook and then replacing this rook with another rook check and then grabbing this bishop. And there's not much can be done. If you take, he just takes back like this, and this bishop is toast. Yeah, this is all over, and this is great play by white, infiltrating to the 7th. So f5, he threw an f5. It doesn't matter. Rook takes, rook e7. Yep, and now there's a simple mate here. Whoa, which he didn't see. After seeing all these amazing tactics, to miss this is quite extraordinary. It's a simple mate, or if the king goes the other way, simple mate. He missed that. I maybe got too excited by the prospect of stealing all these pieces, because he steals a bishop, then he steals a knight. The queen ran to a8, and then the queen took the knight, so he just won 2 extra pieces. But should have gone for the quicker checkmate. Takes, check, here, check. Lovely maneuver, good stuff. And that was the game. Yeah, it's sort of a case of some brilliant tactical play by Kieran. I'm very, very impressed with this whole combination back here of knight takes d5. That is hard to find. That is exceptionally good chess right there. And yeah, it just gave black a uncomfortable position, and Kieran very slowly took advantage of the fact that black's king was very weak, and it was weakened by all these moves much earlier in the game, h6, g5 going on the attack. Yeah, fascinating game. Well, I hope everyone learnt something from that, and you enjoyed that, and I'll talk to you all later.